On This Week in Enterprise Tech, there's a major breakthrough in fiber optics technology, Microsoft gets pushy with Windows Update, and Kingston is here to explain what the future of SSDs in the data center looks like. Twiet on the set.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for This Week in Enterprise Tech is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Twiet. This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 149, recorded July 17th, 2015. Kingston Tech in the data center. This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by ZipRecruiter. Are you hiring? With ZipRecruiter.com, you can post to 100-plus job sites, including social networks, all with a single click. Screen, rate, and hire the right candidates fast. Try ZipRecruiter with a free 4-day trial now at ZipRecruiter.com/Twiet. Welcome to Twiet, This Week in Enterprise Tech. It's the show dedicated to the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and the geek who just wants to know how the world is connected. I'm your host, Father Robert Balassier, the digital Jesuit, your guide to all things in the enterprise. And I'm joined by, well, not Cheebert this week, because Cheebert is currently on a boat looking at ice somewhere in Alaska. And instead, we brought on regular Twiet standby and, well, just my co-host for Coding 101, Mr. Lou Maresca. Lou, welcome back to Twiet.
Hey, Padre. Thanks for having me back. Appreciate it.
You got to be in one of the co-pilot seats. I'm very excited about that. Of course, the other co-pilot is a man who really needs no introduction on this show. He's been around since the very beginning. He brings us his knowledge, his wisdom, and his right coast mentality each and every single week. Mr. Curtis Franklin from Information Week Radio. Curtis, how are things over in the sunny state?
Well, it's not particularly sunny this afternoon, but that makes it a great time to be here with you on Twiet.
Fantastic. And I've got Cheebert in the doc chat right now trying to make trouble, so he's here in spirit. Oh, by the way, Cheebert, just so you know, all the hosts of Twiet today will be receiving super SSDs. I'm afraid you're on a boat, so that's your reward. Let's go ahead and jump straight in to the blips. This first one is, well, I don't know if you want to get political, but it sure sounds political. In what may be a part election year campaigning and part about freaking time story, Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders led a coalition of 4 senators in calling for the FCC to investigate how ISPs are charging their customers. Throwing the FCC's own numbers at the argument, Sanders points out that only 37% of Americans have more than a single option for high-speed internet and calls out a functional de facto monopoly. Sanders also points out the fee fatigue of the modern ISP, a 203% rise in modem fee rentals over the last 3 years, arbitrary bundling and price increases, and most importantly, a complete non-transparency of charges. Some are already discounting the campaign, calling it campaign train grandstanding, but it would be nice to see the ISPs forced to stop playing Scrabble with our bills.
Windows 10 is ready. The predicted success of Windows 10 is a key part of Microsoft's strategy for its 2016 fiscal year. We're less than 2 weeks out from the July 29th launch of Windows 10, and Microsoft is putting the final touches on what executives have called a seminal moment for the company. From this point forward, Windows 10 builds will only be available via Windows Update. If you want to download build 10240, you can either wait for automatic installation or manually check for updates. Now, will we see even more changes to Windows 10 between now and July 29th? Probably, but we're getting really close. On July 29th, Microsoft will first release Windows 10 to insiders so it can ensure compatibility before sending upgrade notifications to the general public.
Does your Apple iPhone know what you can afford? During a Charlie Rose interview last year, Tim Cook took some shots across the bows of some of the large companies by proclaiming that Apple's business is to sell hardware and, quote, our business is not based on having your info. You are not our product, and proclaimed that when they design a new service, they don't actually try to collect any data. In contrast, this past March, Apple filed a patent for a new service around advertising system that would run on your iPhone and track the status of your debit and credit cards. Based off the balance of your accounts, Apple can target ads, serve up product and services that you can actually afford. A quote from the patent: ads delivered to the user includes only one or more objects having a purchase price less than or equal to the available credit for the user. Although this is a patent and it has a chance of never becoming an actual real product, it does go along with the pattern that no companies or corporations are bulletproof to the value of consumer data.
Well, here's something I didn't think I'd be saying so soon. Maybe we're at the end of the BYOD era. With breaches on the rise and sensitive corporate data being leaked every which way to Wiki, it seems that enterprises are starting to slam the door on BYOD. In 2013, a survey of IT professionals found that 34% of businesses had banned BYOD practices. A similar survey conducted this April found that the percentage had shot up to 53%. Additionally, just 7% of the companies without a ban allow for unrestricted BYOD, while the remaining reported that policies had been put in place to add corporate management to any device that an employee wants to connect to the network. Among the reasons for this new trend, the maturation of mobile device management, a desire to keep personal and private data separate, and a cost-benefit analysis that looks at device costs versus data breach costs. Though employees bringing in their own personal devices isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon, it seems that the Wild West days of BYOD are over.
Google wants beacons to be open source. Now, beacons are simple hardware devices that send an ID code to devices configured to pay attention to the BLE signal within a roughly 100-meter range. This week, Google introduced an open spec for Bluetooth Low Energy, that's BLE, beacons, in the hope that it can encourage developers, marketers, and hardware makers to adopt its technology alongside or in lieu of Apple's iBeacon. Why do they care? Mobile apps that can receive the code can respond with a notification or other action that's contextually relevant to the location of the device and its owner. Think ads here. Google is calling its beacon protocol Eddystone, a name that comes from a lighthouse in England. It's available on GitHub under the Apache 2.0 license. The software supports Android, iOS, and many BLE devices, and while no company is making significant use of beacons today, many organizations say they see great potential in beacon technology. As one researcher said, it's just a matter of time before the beacon community uncovers initiatives that add value to customers.
Is it time for spammers to get another job? Is it good news for your inbox? Are mail service providers doing their job? Are legal prosecutions against botnets scaring spammers away? Well, in 2015, June, intelligent report by Symantec claims that for the first time in over a decade, spam rates have fallen almost 50%. The last time the spam rate was this low was 12 years ago in 2003. Out of the 704 billion emails sent in June, only 353 billion were actually classified as spam, making it at 49% of all email. On the flip side, ransomware attacks, where ransomware attacks are a type of malware that restricts the access of your computer that's affected and demands ransom paid to the creator, have increased for the second month in a row. And crypto ransomware has actually reached its highest level since 2014. Although spam is not gone, it's at a low. But for the spam you do get, try to stay away from those links that you don't know or verify. Otherwise, you might owe some hackers some serious cash to gain control back from your machine.
If you live within a third of a mile of Comcast fiber network and are in parts of Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Tennessee, or California, and you're okay with paying a pretty big premium for premium service, then Comcast may have a deal for you. This week, Comcast announced their Gigabit Pro service, a 2 gigabit per second symmetrical connection to Comcast's network. Here's what we know. The service will cost $299.95 a month, though there will be a promotional offer at $159 a month for 3 years for those living in Chicago, Miami, Atlanta, Nashville, Detroit, Chattanooga, Peoria, Champaign, or Knoxville. There will be a 2-year agreement with early termination fees, and installation will take between 6 to 8 weeks or more. The service isn't capped, and at the moment it's not bundled with any additional services. But here's the big catch. Installation and setup will cost $1,000. And Comcast adds that those fees may vary depending on proximity to the fiber plant. Well, that does it for the blips. Let's go ahead and jump into the Enterprise Bites. This first one is something I've been wanting to talk about for a while. We did bring it up as a blip about 3 weeks ago, and the technology behind it is absolutely fantastic. There has been a major breakthrough in optical technology. Now, optical fiber is fantastic for speed over distance, but even it has a problem with extreme distances. While up to 200 discrete frequencies of light are being shot through its core, you're going to have some specialized equipment to make sure that that light is going to arrive at the edge of the fiber in any coherent fashion. Now, over time, because of the imperfections in the fiber, because of crosstalk interference between the different frequencies, and just basic loss to distance, those streams of data will degrade into incoherent mush. We have dealt with that problem in two different ways when we string fiber across long distances, like, for example, the bottom of the Pacific or the Atlantic Ocean. The first way has been to increase the power of the light that you put into the fiber. Of course, if you put more light in, you can lose more before it becomes incoherent. The second way, and this is really what we had to do, was to use repeaters. We've had to put repeaters in the runs along about every 50 or so kilometers to accept the light, make sure that it's proper, do all the error correcting, and then send it off again. Well, that's great, and it works, but the problem is that becomes very expensive, and that is a very big point of failure. If you lose a repeater, you can lose an entire run of fiber. Well, researchers from the Photonics System Group working out of the University of California, San Diego, have found a better way to bypass both of those solutions. Just use one piece of fiber. That's right, their solution uses what they're calling preemptive distortion to cancel out the distortion and crosstalk that occurs within the fiber. Think of it like those telescopes that they have with the movable mirrors. They can determine what kind of interference they're getting from the atmosphere, and they pre-distort the mirrors so that the distorted image coming into the telescope gets undistorted by the time it gets to the sensors. They're doing the exact same thing, but they're doing it with fiber. Their system is called a frequency comb, and it synchronizes the frequency variations across the different light streams to create the inverse of the expected interference. Now, as a result, and this is mind-blowing, remember, we had to do a repeater every 50 kilometers or so, they were able to push a transmission over 7,400 miles without a repeater and without any costly amplifiers. Now, I can't stress enough how big of a breakthrough this is in network technology. Curtis, I want to throw this over to you first. Those repeaters are one of the big expenses of laying fiber. I mean, yes, you have to rent a specialized boat and a crew, and you have to have huge spools of fiber, but the repeaters were always the weak point because since you had to have them every 50 kilometers and since they had to be powered, they were always introducing a point of failure into your transatlantic and transpacific fiber. This, if it works properly and if they can deploy it, this is a game changer, right?
Oh, it absolutely is, especially for international communications. You know, as you say, when you mention boat, this is the kind of thing that's important for terrestrial fiber, but it's absolutely critical for undersea cables. Imagine being able to exponentially lower the cost of these undersea cables, both in deployment and in maintenance. We've already got a lot of cable crisscrossing the ocean floors, but we could see many, many more going back and forth between the east coast of the U.S. and Europe, or the west coast and Asia. And that means that the idea of tying global enterprises into one well-synchronized, connected organization are much, much greater.
One of the things that this is going to do is this is going to greatly reduce the cost of owning your own fiber. We've seen this more and more. Companies like Google have been getting into the game to actually lay their own fiber because it means that they don't have to rent it, lease it from anybody else. They can say they own it from station to station. Microsoft recently got into this game too, and they've built an even higher capacity one than the one that Google has. Lou, let me throw this over to you. This kind of technology makes it possible for even companies that are not the size of a Google, not the size of a Microsoft, to own their own fiber or even own a piece of the fiber. If you can run 200 strands through a fiber run, you could now have one company say, well, look, we're going to buy one of those strands, and since we don't have to pay for 200 repeaters, we can actually afford this. What does that do for fiber capacity?
Not only does it increase the capacity, the capability, but it also makes it more affordable for businesses. If you think about it, this is very similar to the whole design of, like, for instance, any of the wireless technology out there. Like, we were kind of restricted by the physics of it and by the distance of the towers. And then they started to change the way the data was actually transmitted over them, right? More compression, then you had allow the towers to be more, farther distance apart. And this is very similar. The internet's gotten to the point where, especially with the need for businesses to have express routes and, high speed between their business and making it more affordable. So this is just the next step. And I think it's going to make a huge difference, especially for service providers out there to allow to bring things down to the smaller business.
Absolutely. I wish Chibert were here. We probably should have talked about the story last week when he was still here. He's actually been on these ships. He knows a lot about laying fiber. In fact, he is responsible right now for trying to reuse a ring of fiber around the Hawaiian Islands to bring some backup communication capacity online. But he's in the chat room right now, and he's mentioning that right now, because there are so few ships that can handle this specialized job of laying fiber or bringing fiber up whenever a repeater dies, he says that it could be close to 90% of the cost of laying a transatlantic or trans-Pacific cable associated with those repeaters. So if you take out those repeaters, suddenly the cost of laying a run across the Atlantic might drop from a couple of $100 million or maybe even $1 billion, depending on the capacity, down to a few million. That's amazing. I mean, when you talk about something that could really change the way that we think about who owns the fiber, well, that's definitely one of them. I do want to bring that story up again when Chibert's back. I don't want to derive him of the pleasure of being able to geek out with me. And actually, I think we're trying to get an expert right now, a person who's actually worked on transatlantic and trans-Pacific fiber, who can come into the show and we'll geek out together. So, Chibert, I know you're watching the stream right now, and I know you're in the chat room. I'll save that one for you, my friend. Let's go ahead and move on to the second enterprise bite. Specifically, Microsoft's getting pushy about Windows updates. Now, in the past version of Windows that actually had Windows updates, so that's XP and above, you've always been able to select an option about notifying before downloading, or download then notify, or download and install automatically, or don't check, don't do anything. That's been a user choice. That choice seems to be going away with Windows 10. In the EULA, Section 6 specifically, it says, and I quote, "You may obtain updates only from Microsoft or authorized sources," that's normal, "and Microsoft may need to update your system to provide you with those updates." Okay, it's getting a little scary. And then, by accepting this agreement, you agree to receive these types of automatic updates without any additional notice. Now, this seems to be a pretty clear roadmap for what Microsoft wants. We know why they're doing this, because they consider Windows 10 not just Windows, it's Windows as a service. This is their new model. This is how it's going to work. It's constant updates. There's no more patch Tuesdays. Things just get fixed. Things just work. But that's going to upset some people who have gotten used to being able to turn things off when they don't want them. For example, one of my biggest pet peeves has been when Windows decides that it's going to do an upgrade and then reboot in the middle of a long render. That's caught me more than a few times, and every time it's happened, it's been beyond frustrating. It's actually cost resources. They do have a solution for that, in that you can turn on an option that will allow you to, well, better select when it's going to update and when it's going to reboot. But still, this is a pretty big paradigm shift. I want to throw this over to you first, Lou. This obviously is Microsoft saying this is how this is going to be. This is Windows as a service. But there has always been this interesting balance between what we might consider Mac OS X or Windows, where Windows was anything goes. You can customize it the way you want to run it. That's what we love about Windows, and we won't tell you otherwise. We now seem to be swinging more towards the middle, maybe even past the middle, more towards what Apple's been doing with their operating system, because Microsoft wants to provide a more consistent ecosystem. Is this where we're going?
It happens from, I have multiple different angles here, especially as a developer. First thing is, being a consumer, sometimes they tend to drag their feet when it comes to applying updates. And sometimes it's not their fault, because some of the PC makers, like you were talking about, like OEM versions of Windows, they'll mark that to do manual updates only, or opt-in type of updates. And in fact, I have some older relatives that sit on a very old and vulnerable version of Windows for a long time without applying any updates because they don't know how to do it. So that I think there's a large portion of the population that use PCs and Windows that do that, and I think that this is going to help them, making their machine more secure, making it more compatible with some of the new stuff that's coming out. And so I really like this model going forward. And again, we didn't mention, but for businesses, it's a common pattern where they tend to drag their feet because they claim things like deployment costs and delays if they do upgrade Windows, or their legacy line of business apps don't work with some of the updates. And so IT doesn't want to spend time and money to serve up calls from their internal users from some of the OS changes. So this kind of regulates that rollout. So they have the ability to kind of decide on when things update. They're kind of on a slower path. But to me, this new model is going to be, I think it's going to be a lot better. I think, like you said, it's similar to Apple model where you can better the features of the OS, making it, bringing things closer to the user. And again, the security side and the vulnerability side, making sure those holes are plugged before anybody gets a chance to roll any kind of vulnerabilities out.
We've already seen a precedent for this set out in the social media stage, which is, for most of us, for the vast majority of us, as long as we see a benefit to the updates, like we get new features and things just get fixed, I think quickly people will say, okay, that's fine. Let's do it automatically. In fact, a lot of us in the security world would say this is no longer an option. We don't live in a world where it's okay not to patch something because your computer puts your entire network at risk, which puts your data at risk, et cetera, et cetera. However, and I want to throw this over to you, Curtis, and the chat room has picked on this very quickly. Titus, Lawn Dog, Eliz, Adrian, they're all calling this out, which is every single one of us who uses Windows has had a update failure. I will say that every single one of us has had at least one instance of a Windows update gone wrong, either not installing properly or even borking the system. Does all the goodwill of having new features and having it just work and having a tighter ecosystem go away the first time there is a mass mess up of a deployment and Windows as a service becomes Windows as a doorstop?
That would certainly throw a wrench into the happy feeling around all of this. And one of the things that we talk about a lot here on Twiat is the cost benefit calculation that people have to do around security and updating their infrastructure and all sorts of other things. And I suspect that that's one of the things that's going on here. What is the possibility of this mass borking that you talk about versus the cost of mass exploit of a bug that millions of users choose not to patch? And I think the calculation has been done, and it's hard to argue right now that it's wrong, that the potential cost of the borking is lower. Now, one of the other things that this is going to do, in addition to telling people that they are going to pay attention because it's being forced upon them, is that they really should pay attention to things like best practices regarding backups. Because let's all admit that we've, as you say, pretty much all of us have had an update of some system go wrong. And a good, solid, up-to-date backup is the difference between a pain in the rear and an absolute disaster.
Lou, I'm sorry, I don't mean to trash Microsoft. I actually use Microsoft products pretty extensively, but I think we just heard the show title. It will be Windows 10, the Borkening. Let's go ahead and move on to the next Enterprise Byte. This one actually has me very excited. I got to speak with Mary Jo Foley on Wednesday when I was hosting Windows Weekly with her and Paul Thurrott. And the day before, she had gotten one-on-one time with Satya Nadella. Now, her backstory was fantastic. She said none of the normal safeguards were in place. Normally, when you talk to a high-level executive, there's a PR person there who will give you the ground rules. You can ask this, this, this. You can't ask that. I will stop you at any time if I think you're getting to an area that you shouldn't be asking about. They did none of that. They basically said, hey, Mary Jo Foley, how would you like to have 30 minutes with Satya Nadella? And she sort of said, duh. Yeah, okay, let's do that. Now, you got to read. Go ahead and go to ZDNet. This article is fantastic. This is an actual transcript of the interview. You can decide for yourself, as so many bloggers and analysts are looking at right now, all the different hints that Mr. Nadella gave us about the roadmap that Microsoft will be taking. But there are a couple of interesting tidbits and takeaways that I want to draw out. The first one is, and I got this one from Mary Jo, Satya makes a distinction between Windows Mobile with a capital M and Windows Mobile with a small m. And that sounds really strange and it sounds kind of petty, but it actually makes sense. When he talks about Windows Mobile with the big M, he's talking about Windows Phone. He's talking about the devices that have a very low penetration, but they've decided to refocus and perhaps put out a flagship product. But he was more excited about Windows Mobile with the small m because he said that's the ecosystem. We're now looking at ecosystems. We don't just want to throw out a bunch of product. And in that ecosystem, you have Windows Mobile with a big M, a very small piece of it, but you also have Windows apps or Microsoft apps that go on any mobile device. Office for iOS, Office for Android. And you also have things like the HoloLens. Lou, let me throw this over to you. Have the troops heard this yet? I mean, this was just a couple of days ago, but have any of your managers, has the message trickled down that we're going to focus on the things that are working, we're going to strip away the things that are not, and we are going to actually try to build up an ecosystem to make the brand worth something?
You know, one thing you're going to learn, and everyone's learning about Satya, is what he says is like gold, because what he means is, even internally, he's been telling us this mobile first, cloud first kind of ecosystem, and that's been going on. It's the day that he started in his job, he started pushing the company in that direction. And, you know, even in our team, you know, building applications that's what we're doing. We're moving in that direction. And, you know, so, you know, this whole talk about, you know, mobile and making sure that we're focusing more on, you know, the customer's needs and focusing more on quality and, you know, mobile experience and that kind of thing. That's, again, been very similar asks of all the different teams and the groups going forward. Like you said, Office team is focusing on that and which they haven't in the past. So I think these are very important things that all of the groups need to know about, and they are, and they're starting to put that in the forefront when they do their job.
Absolutely. Now, the second point, the second takeaway that I took from this interview, and I want to throw this over to you first, Curtis. Satya says he wants time to reinvent Microsoft. This was atypical. I mean, whenever I hear executives speak, it's always about, we've got a plan. You're going to be very happy. Don't trust us, trust us, trust us. This was Satya actually saying, look, we're trying to turn this around. He understands the strategy that Microsoft had wasn't working, which is already, that's very hard to admit. But he said, and this is my favorite quote, "You've got to remember that even Apple regeneration started with colorful iMacs. So let us first get those colorful iMacs." I think with that, with what we're doing with the Lumia, we're at that stage. I want to do good devices that people like, and then we'll go on to doing the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Oh, he based that next thing on three things specifically. One was the reinvention of what productivity means. A second one was building an intelligent cloud, just like Lou mentioned. And the third was redefining what we mean by personal computing. What does that say to you, first of all, about his plan for Microsoft, and also, what does it mean to reinvent productivity and what the personal computer means?
Well, I think based on what I'm hearing and what I've seen, that the whole notion of reinventing productivity and redefining personal computing has a great deal to do with communications and collaboration. And it's interesting because on the one hand, this is new. This is moving away from an individual working solely on their own projects, things that happened, you know, with the traditional spreadsheet or a word processor where one person sits down and types away and does stuff and then sends it off to someone else. This is people actively collaborating on projects. In another sense, though, this gets back to something that Microsoft has been doing for a long, long time. You know, I remember being at Byte magazine back in 1986. Microsoft came in and talked about their programming system, their programming environment. And we were looking at them and we were looking at Borland. Those were the two big names in programming for the PC at that point. Borland was all about what an individual could do on their personal machine, making sure that everything worked on that individual environment. Microsoft came in with a vision that talked about making great use of what was then a very new set of technologies around local area networking. people working in programming groups and developing as part of a team effort. We had a debate at Byte about which one was right, but it has been shown over the years that Microsoft was right in their approach and was, in fact, way ahead of the game in figuring out the tools. Borland no longer exists, and Microsoft still is an enormous power in development. I think something similar to that is going on in this notion of productivity and personal computing. They're seeing people use desktop machines, laptop machines, and handheld devices made by any number of companies as being part of this larger redefined ecosystem.
Exciting times indeed. Let's go ahead and move on to the third piece. He was speaking about Continuum. And actually, if you watch this week's Windows Weekly, Paul and Mary Jo do a really good job of explaining why that's important. Continuum is a big strategy for Microsoft, but I don't know if many of us actually understand where that could be used. Lou, what is Continuum, and why do they keep saying it's the merging of mobile and the desktop?
So Continuum is a technology to allow you to really kind of bring things together. It's kind of the whole idea of you're doing work on your desktop and you need to move your phone and vice versa. And it kind of gives you the ability to use your device to do things like Miracast wirelessly and support other type wireless technologies, using it as a touchpad, that kind of thing. So it creates that kind of, like you said, a merged feel between your desktop and your phone. And I think that this will be a huge thing, because if you ever, I don't know about you, but when I use my phone, sometimes I'll be reading an article and I want to go to my phone and just start walking around, or go to a meeting and I want to continue reading vice versa with an email. Maybe I have a document I need to do to take with me. Maybe I need to walk into a meeting and present it to the team. And I was working on my desktop, but I want to show it on, in the meeting room. These are all very important things, and these all help with Continuum. It makes that kind of continuous feel as you move around between the different ecosystems. And I think this will be huge for not only businesses, but it'll be huge for consumers as well.
One last bit, and Curtis, I'm going to throw this back over to you. Satya made, again, a very rare mea culpa here, essentially admitting that they had screwed over some of the partners. With Windows 8, with the overall strategy, with RT, there were a lot of partners who were upset with them. But now they want to be buddy-buddy. They want to bring everything together. They want to mend the fences and have some of these OEMs come in and manufacture decent Windows phones. And they want the software partners to come in and manufacture good software for Windows. Are these just kind words, or are you hearing any whispers that this might actually be in motion?
I'm starting to hear whispers that this is in motion, and I think that it has a lot to do with an acknowledgement that Microsoft needs those partners. Now, this sounds like old news. Microsoft has always depended upon partners from the very beginning. But around the time of Windows 8, there's always been some tension when Microsoft has gotten into the hardware business. Is it showing partners what is possible, sort of blazing a trail that the partners could follow, or is it competing with the partners, getting more into what an old hand in the industry called co-opetition? And I think there's the acknowledgement that they had gone a little bit too far in a direction of not allowing those partners to compete, at least partially, through not giving them the kind of support they needed to develop products that were competitive. So I think that this is part of a much larger initiative. We're seeing when Microsoft do things like reevaluate their licensing strategies with enterprises. We're seeing them look at a lot of different areas that have been off limits for real discussion for a long time. And I think it's just part of that whole reimagining, re-envisioning the company and taking a look at absolutely everything to see what's required in order to move forward.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for your input on the Enterprise Bytes. Now, when we come back, if you like products like this, I don't know, this is a PCI Express linked SSD. It's a Predator. Can do reads of 1,400 megabytes per second, writes of 1,000. Or maybe you're more traditional and you want maybe one of their HyperX SSDs that will top out the SATA bus. Well, good, because we've got some gurus from Kingston who are going to be coming on the show to explain how this tech is headed to a data center near you. But before we do that, let's go ahead and take a moment to thank the sponsor of this episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Let me ask you a question. Are you hiring right now? Because if you are, this is the moment. This is the thing. The people that you hire, the people who work for you, the people who make your products, who run your services, who program for you, who do everything from bookkeeping to visionary work with design, they're going to decide whether or not you succeed or fail. Well, knowing that now, why are you trusting your hiring decisions to an ad in the paper or a single post on a job site? That just doesn't work anymore, which is why we're happy to have ZipRecruiter as a sponsor of the Twiat Riot. Now, ZipRecruiter understands that posting your job in one place just isn't enough to find quality candidates. With ZipRecruiter.com, you post your job once and it gets placed on 100+ job sites, and it gets instantly matched to candidates from over 4 million resumes. You just post once, and within 24 hours, you can watch the qualified candidates roll into ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use interface, letting you make the right decisions about hiring in the least amount of time. Now, find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by over 400,000 businesses. You can try ZipRecruiter today with a free 4-day trial and get your perfect candidate before they get snatched up by somebody else. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/Twiat. That's ZipRecruiter.com/Twiat and try them today. And we thank ZipRecruiter for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Now, in just a moment, we're going to be bringing you some of the solid-state goodness that you can expect in data centers of the future. But before then, for those people in vertical markets who are looking for indestructible devices that will last the next upgrade cycle, here's a look from Mobile Focus 2015. I'm Father Robert Ballecer, the digital Jesuit for Twit TV here at Mobile Focus 2015. Now, enterprise users are different than the rest of the world because we don't expect our products to refresh over and over and over again. They're going to be used for a much longer period of time. They need to be more rugged, which is why we're here at Arbor. I'm speaking with Vincent Chung. He's going to explain what Arbor can do for those vertical enterprises. Vincent, thank you very much for speaking with us.
Sure thing. Good to meet you. Basically, what we are, Arbor is an engineering company. Our background is embedded computer boards, and we've been doing that for about 20 years. And one of the attributes shared by all of our products is that they are embedded long lifecycle products. We support them from 5 to 7 years. And again, the reason we do that is because we have people design on this hardware, and they can't afford to have the design change on them from month to month, which happens with a consumer product. Basically, when you buy a device like our Gladius tablet, we support the same design for about 5 years, and when we do a refresh, we keep as many of the attributes static as possible. So while we might upgrade and change the chipset, all the ports will be in the same place, all the functionality will be the same, and the reason we do this is because it eases the transition from refresh to refresh.
And that's really important for the enterprise because unlike the consumer market where maybe you're refreshing 1-2 devices that you may have, if you're in an enterprise and you need to replace 1,000 seats, 5,000 seats, 10,000 seats, you don't want to operate on a life cycle of months. You want years.
That is correct.
Tell me about something like this. So this is a Windows tablet, and obviously it's been set up for point of sale.
That's correct. So this is a Windows tablet. It runs on the newest Bay Trail processor. Basically, it's a rugged tablet. It's IP65. It's rated for a 4-foot drop, so it is a rugged device. It runs Windows 8.1. And, besides from the specs, we're talking, a built-for-purpose device. This is, again, a point-of-sale device. We have a magnetic stripe reader on the top. You flip it over, you'll find the barcode scanner on the bottom. RFID, we bundled it with many accessories. And again, we sell this into mostly enterprise applications. Our most popular ones, I'd say, are warehousing applications and field services.
When you're deciding what kind of format you're going to freeze into that 5 to 7 years of service, how do you decide that? I mean, what size is the screen going to be? What kind of specs are you going to choose? Because obviously you're going to be with that for a while.
Right. It's actually based on market demand. One of the unique features of Arbor is that we have quite a wide portfolio. For example, we have a 5-inch tablet here, an 8-inch, and we are coming out with a 10-inch and a 12-inch in short time. This allows you to start with a product you're familiar with and kind of migrate up or migrate down as needed.
Fantastic. Vincent, if they wanted to find out more about Arbor, more about your product line, maybe more about your ruggedized PCs, where do they go?
I would direct them to arborsolution.com or simply Google Arbor Embedded or Arbor Computing, and you'll arrive right at our site.
There you have it, folks. I'm Father Robert Ballas. Get tough, get longevity, get enterprise, get Arbor. If you're in the vertical market, maybe you need to check out what Arbor can do for you and your mobile devices. Now, we have the pleasure at this point in the episode of speaking with two men who, I've worked with them on and off for, I'd say, like the last 4 or 5 years, ever since CES a long time ago, when they showed me how ridiculously performance-ridden they could get a desktop by putting, 16 SSDs in it. Let's start off on my left-hand side, Mr. Cameron Crandall. Cameron, what's your actual title at Kingston?
So I am a technology manager in our SSD product engineering group.
All right. And on my other side is, well, actually, you've seen him before. He was in our CES videos. He's shown up on a segment of Know-How. And, yeah, was that it? I think you may have been in a Coding 101's bit just for a while. Mr. David Leong. David, you're in PR with Kingston.
I am.
But you're also a bit of a gamer, a bit of a techie, a bit of a geek.
A little bit. You know, yeah.
Major nerd. I think we should put that in there. Yeah.
Major nerd.
Yeah.
Well, what's below my name is true. I just want everybody to know that. So,
we brought the two of you on because there is a topic that we've been wanting to play with for a while, and that is this idea of SSDs moving into the data center. Now, of course, it's been happening for a while. SSDs have now hit a price point. They've hit a reliability that makes them perfect for big data, that make it perfect for transactional databases. And in the past on this show, we've talked about some of the pros and the cons, where you would want to use flash and where you wouldn't. But there has been a new wrinkle in what we've expected out of flash in the data center. In the past, we've been either using slightly up-moded consumer-level SATA-based storage, typically with hardier NAND flash, so that it could be called an enterprise application. Or you had something that was very proprietary, something like the SandForce array from SanDisk that has a proprietary set of cards that give you sort of a SAS access to something that was very fast and very reliable. But now we're seeing the encroachment of PCIe. Tell me a little bit about that, Cameron.
So if you look back when SSDs really first hit the market back in 2008, 2009, it made sense to build SSDs that attached to the current hard drive interfaces, which were SATA and SAS. But even back then, the industry knew that SATA and SAS were going to be a bottleneck for an SSD. But at the time, it made sense to build these devices with the hard drive interfaces because there were so many ports to plug into immediately, and they could solve a lot of business needs right away. But looking further into the future, we knew there was a better interface for flash than SATA and SAS. So PCI Express was that interface that looked very desirable because it was already in place. We didn't need to create new platforms to support this interface. And now what we're seeing, many years later, 6 years later, is that coming to fruition. We're seeing a big desire to move away from the SATA and SAS host interface and get the SSD and flash closer to the processor through the PCI Express bus.
David, let me ask you about that. When you start talking about the roadmap that Kingston has for memory, it's always included something like the Predator. The Predator is the latest and the greatest. It's the new hotness. I just tested this thing on Before You Buy, and it blows people away. I mean, how ridiculously much faster it is than everything else. But when do you start to see the convergence? When do we start having enterprise editions of the Predator? Or is the Predator and products like it, just by its very nature, enterprise ready?
It is enterprise ready. When we launched Predator, one of the first questions I got was, we have this brand new PCIe. I want to talk about PCIe. It's so fast, blazing fast over SATA. First question we get is NVMe.
Yeah.
When are you going to have NVMe?
Actually, we got that from Lundog in the chat room. He says, we want PCIe and we want MVNE, and this actually has both of them.
Yeah, I think Londog in the chat room here has made it very clear that he or she wants NVMe. That is on our roadmap. First thing, before we do NVMe, we do have a higher capacity Predator coming.
so this is 480. You're going to.
Oh, we're going up.
Okay.
We're going supersize. We're gonna supersize that one. So we'll do that, and then we have NVMe coming up. I think maybe Cameron, maybe before the end of the year.
Yep, Q4. Yep.
All right. Now, Cameron, let me ask you this: Why wouldn't I want just an enterprise version of something like the Savage? So this will do. Is it 550, 540, right? 550 write. 550 read, 540 write.
Yeah, I think it's 550, 525.
525.
Yeah.
This is fine for most applications. This is going to work. Why wouldn't I just want to keep revving this up?
We always want more, right? And I think in the data center, if you can lower latency and increase IOPS, we can always feed an application, or we can always feed an SSD more data. With the applications that we have in place, and a lot of that is OLTP database type applications. I think there's always a need for lower latency and greater performance. I think that's really what's driving PCI Express.
Yeah. One of the things that people may not know about is the fact that we've hit the wall as far as SATA devices are concerned. 550 is as much as you're going to get off this bus because there's also overhead. I mean,
Right.
On paper it goes to 600. But they're not going to give us like SATA revision 4. This is it. This is it. It's done.
Yep.
And so if we want more performance, there are a couple of options. You could do something like a SAS chassis, or you do PCIe. Why do you think it's better to go PCIe?
We still, because of the lower latency, we're closer to the processor. We don't have the overhead with the host controller that we have with SATA and SAS. And really the main barrier to broad-based adoption with PCI Express and servers today has been the limit to PCI Express lanes. We just cannot scale PCI Express SSDs today in the form that we do with 2.5-inch SATA and SAS. If you look at the mainstream servers that are in the marketplace today, they're supporting 8, 16, and 24 drive bays right in the front of the server. So in order to get broad-based adoption of PCI Express, we have to displace those drive bays with PCI Express devices. And the two main barriers to PCI being more mainstream today than it is one is serviceability, right? The PCI Express drives that exist today, they look like this device here. And if we have a failure inside the server, we've got to open that server up and replace it. So it's not serviceable. And we don't have that scalability. But there's technology that's coming about right now that is going to enable that to be possible, and that is PCI Express switching that will be on the backplanes.
Right.
So that will enable the scalability of 8, 16, and 24 2.5-inch PCI Express SSDs in the front of servers. So now the customer is going to have the option, do I go with a SATA and SAS backplane, or do I want to go for greater performance with a PCI Express backplane? But that switching technology is really what was key to enabling serviceability and scalability. So now there's only a few systems in the marketplace today that support this, but next year you're going to start to see more and more of these systems that are coming out that are going to support larger scale PCI Express devices in the front of the server, and that's when you're going to have broad-based adoption. We don't, we're limited with these types of devices in terms of the number of ports we can plug into. When you start offering, 16 or 24 2.5-inch PCI Express drive bays in the front of a server, you've got something that's a lot more exciting, especially to a manufacturer like Kingston or others. The volume is going to go way up.
Right. And actually, that ability to service without having to completely tear down a chassis, that's
a big deal.
It's a huge deal in a high density data center. Question quickly from Londog. He wants to know when PCIe and NVMe will be bootable.
Soon. NVMe is still being developed. I think next year we're going to have bootable capability, and NVMe is going to be much more mature than it is today, and it's going to offer us, great performance. Offers great performance above even what we're seeing today with HCI interface devices as well as the custom driver solutions that are out there.
David, I want to ask you a question. I'm not sure if you can answer this, but we have seen companies like Kingston put out the consumer version of a product, and then you have the enterprise version of a product. And typically we would see the enterprise version was lower spec'd for speed, but it had greater IOPS and it had greater reliability. It was rated to last a lot longer. Where, and then again, this is where I'm not sure if you can answer this, where's the breakdown there? Where does it start to become economical for a company like Kingston to really start serving an enterprise product over a consumer product, or a consumer product over an enterprise product?
You know, I think one of the things about Kingston is that we've always strived to service the both the enterprise and the consumer market. For Kingston as a company has been around for 27 years, and really the first 17 or so of those years were really geared towards, we were known as the enterprise company. You know, this is the company that corporate America goes to for their server RAM. Where I think a lot of that started is when we started in the flash business, which was around 2004. That's when you saw the coming in of really USBs and cards. That's where the consumer side started to take off a little bit. And then you fast forward to 2009 when we launched our first SSDs, and our very first SSD was client consumer based. I think I can't really speak to where the enterprise market, where they were at that time, you know, as far as the data centers or even deploying SSDs in a mass scale on a company level. And I think that's something that Cameron can speak to, because he goes out and visits a lot of our customers. What we try and do is we try and service both, especially the products that we have here today, the Predator, the Savage. That's from our HyperX line, our high performance line. We aim that squarely at the prosumers, the enthusiast crowd, the overclockers, the guys that build their systems, and got to have the best of the best, fastest of the fastest. But I should add that in the time that we've done our PCIe SSDs, I think we've had a fair amount of demand and certainly questions on the corporate side for that drive for the data center. Is that right, Cameron?
Yeah, I can add a little bit to that. We offer a consumer drive that we sell through e-tail and retail. We have drives that are sold to business customers for client use, for notebook and desktop upgrades. And then we have drives that are designed for server use, and they include power fail circuits. We have a drive that has very high endurance NAND that's used on it, and that carries a higher price point. But what's interesting about the enterprise market is what we have seen as a trend is a lot of these high-end data center customers want a good, high-quality client-level drive to put in their server. They're not necessarily wanting to pay the extra cost for the higher endurance NAND or the power fail circuits on the SSDs. They want a good, high-end client-level drive at a good price. And if it fails within a year or two, it's still a less costly approach to flash-based storage than going for the higher-end drives with the power fail circuits and the higher endurance flash.
So you're thinking a lot of these customers that you see are willing to take high-performance consumer level rather than something that's specifically been designed for enterprise, just because the extra reliability is not worth it with so robust networks out there.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that I mean, you hit it right on the head. I think that if you look at the software-defined storage, and we're not going to go down that road too far, but there's so much redundancy now. There's so much data replication. We've got such fast networks now that, you know, if we lose a drive or two in a data array, it's not that big of a deal anymore. You know. The power fail circuits, I'd say about 30% of our enterprise customers want that power fail circuit, but a lot of them, there's 2 power supplies, there's UPS backups in place. They don't want to pay the extra money for those features, so they go for the good high-end client-level drive at the lower price point.
That's actually very different from what I've heard of. I mean, a lot of the folks who will come onto Twight will tell us that, well, enterprise means zero failure. You can't have any failure. This is a different approach. This is just assume failure. You're going to have failure. Just make the system robust enough to handle it. That's, wow. And actually, that makes it a whole lot cheaper.
It does, significantly. Yeah, I mean, I'd say the majority of our server SSD sales are client-level SSD.
Wow. Still kind of blown away by that.
Yeah.
That's but some of those you'll see client level SSDs behind RAID controllers.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. Oh, let's get a little geeky here, because I love these. I just tested a bunch of these on Before You Buy and in Know-How, and they do wonders for my machine. But the Predator isn't just faster. One of the things that also makes it much more suited for servers is the IOPS are off the chart.
Right.
So tell me why are these two technologies so different? I mean, yes, the interface is different and the packaging is different, but what makes the technology in something like that contained within an M.2 format so much better at doing input-output operations?
So we're connected to the PCI Express bus, so we're closer to the processor. We don't have all the overhead of the host controller, the SATA or SAS host controller. We have multiple lanes that we're working with, right? So a SATA or SAS drive, we're working with a single port. With a PCI Express device, we're working with 4 or more lanes at 500 megabytes a second each. And that's what really gives us the big bump in performance. But latency shouldn't be ignored. I think that especially in server applications, large database applications, latency is key. And with PCI Express, you can just get incredibly low latencies over a standard SATA or SAS configuration, even in a RAID configuration, because you're wiping out the entire the RAID stack that's there as well. So lower latency, higher bandwidth performance, higher IOPS out of a single PCI Express device.
I want to bring in my my co-host at this time. Lou, let's bring you in first. So you're dealing with CRM a lot. So a lot of your software is running on a lot of the hardware that people are building out with their SSDs. High reliability. No single failure can take anything down. You just have to trust that the transactional database has enough input-output resources to be able to serve everyone who needs that information at any given time. Do you deal at all, when you're developing new software at Microsoft, with the state of the hardware? I mean, do they start looking at that, or that's way down the line?
That's a good question. Yeah. So for CRM, we have both an online and an on-prem deployment. And the on-prem, so not only in online, we actually own our own infrastructure internally here, but on on-prem, we have to deal with it too, because a lot of the times the scale of a company's or corporation's CRM infrastructure requires that their I/O be up to par with how many users they have, the services that they're running. And so when we develop services, like for instance, I own a service called the server-side sync product, which syncs data between Exchange and CRM backend. And the key here is a lot of companies send a lot of emails, especially customer service. And so when you're syncing that amount of data over a period of time, over, let's say, 20,000 users, you are hitting a database quite often. And that I/O is so important to ensure that you can scale and make sure that you can save that data off in a transactional manner. So like hardware, we have macro environments internally here, we're testing it. And these are super important to understand what people are using from a hardware perspective. And these devices just make it so much easier for us to ensure that we don't have to really think about it going forward.
I want to jump over to Curtis in just a bit. Curtis, I'm going to be asking you about the use of client-level drives in enterprise applications, whether or not you've been hearing that in your murmurs on Information Week Radio. But we actually have a good question here for you, Cameron, from Keith512. Wants to know about the scaling. So right now we're talking about 4 lanes. You've got a product that will do 1,400 megabytes per second read, 1,000 megabytes per second write. Let's talk a little bit about the PCI lane. So there's going to be some system builders in there. What do they need? What's the difference between Gen 2 and Gen 3? And what is as we approach the upper limit, what can they expect?
Yeah, so today our Predator drive is a Gen 2 by 4 configuration. So Generation 2 PCI Express, 4 lanes. We're currently in the marketplace at Gen 3 PCIe, and Gen 4 is being worked on. Our upcoming enterprise class PCI Express drive is going to be a Gen 3 product by 4. Once we've got the switching technology on the backplanes, we don't necessarily need to build a device that is supporting really more than 4 lanes, because we're going to be able to switch in and out so quickly. And we'll still get the aggregate benefit of spanning drives across a backplane. But yeah, the switching technology is really going to enable scalability and performance. We don't necessarily have to build an SSD with 8 lanes or 16 lanes just because they're available.
Right. Well, you could, but
you could, yeah.
Probably.
I think you run into you run into some other problems by going to 8 and 16 lanes in the architecture.
I could see someone making a 16-lane RAID controller with a bunch of M.2 slots and then running it that way. But now we're getting ridiculous, crazy, ridiculous. Curtis, let me throw over to you. That point of enterprises using client-level drives and just accounting for failure. Do you hear that strategy a lot? Because I know when we spoke last, there was money being spent on these huge enterprise-class arrays that would never fail, that were just black boxes. You could always account on your data being in there. Have you heard much the other way?
Well, I think it depends greatly on the application. For example, if you're doing OLAP stuff, analytics processing, where you're going through and just analyzing stuff, you can stand a much higher level of individual device failure. And so we are hearing people, because those also tend to be quite massive databases. On the OLTP side, the online transaction processing, especially in financials, there's a much lower tolerance for error. And so for those, you tend to hear about people demanding the higher reliability. One of the things I'm curious and would love to hear our friends from Kingston talk about is the notion that I've heard a lot of people mentioning, that Internet of Things analytics is being applied to things like arrays, where people are looking at analyzing behavior of devices to try to figure out well ahead of time when a device is likely to go into a less reliable state. Is that something that your OEMs or you are dealing with? And if so, is that something that customers care about?
In terms of endurance analytics on the drive itself?
Yes.
Yeah, we have tools that enable us to look at various aspects of the drive. And one of the basic ones is an SSD life left, which is basically a fuel gauge for the SSD to tell you where you are in terms of wear. But we've also got more granular tools within Smart that we can use as well, where we can look at the difference between host writes and flash writes, which give us the write amplification factor, which is very key to understanding a workload and then recommending the right SSD for an application. So we can look at how much data was actually sent from the host and what was actually written to flash, and we can look at write amplification. And with some very simple math, we can determine, if that workload was to stay the same, how long those drives would last in that particular application based on their endurance rating and the type of flash that we're using. So yes, definitely. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. It really depends on the application that the SSD is being used in, as to the tolerance level for whether they're going to use a client level SSD or a more robust enterprise class SSD that has higher endurance flash and the PFEL circuits. But yeah, definitely those tools exist, and I would say we sell to a lot of different customers, and we have some super techie customers that are looking at their workloads closely with the tools that we offer. And then we have another set of customers that don't focus, too much on that, or maybe they don't know their customers' workload. We see that a lot in the web scale type companies that we sell to. They stand up servers for their customers, but they don't know how much data is actually being written to the drives. Specifically, they don't know their customer's workload because their customer basically owns the hardware. And so it just depends on the application and the type of customer that's being served. But those tools do exist.
Right. It's interesting because on Know-How, we have had quite a few people ask us, well, do I know my SSD is about to die when it starts getting slow? And that might have been true at some point in history of SSDs, but you were telling me earlier this morning, and actually, David, you were telling me this too, which is the wear leveling has become so advanced on all the major manufacturers. Any reputable manufacturer will have wear leveling to the point that the total bytes written is a very good indicator of when you have to replace it, and nothing else. It's not going to slow down. It's not going to start losing random bits of data. It's just when you get close as possible to the 3,000 or so program array cycles, that's when you replace.
Yeah, we've come a long way in controller technology, and it was one of the things we were talking about this morning. You know, we look at wear leveling, look at trim, garbage collection, things like that, spreading out the writes evenly. And that technology has come so far that, you know, especially on a client side, consumer client side, I don't really think that's much of a concern these days. You know, Cameron?
Yeah, it's more on the enterprise side. In terms of failure, I can talk a little bit more about you know, SSD end of life behavior. You know, an SSD has to have reserve blocks on a drive. It has to have reserve flash, and you know, there's this concept of over provisioning, which you guys have probably heard. You know, you see some SSDs in the marketplace that aren't, you know, exactly 512, 256. 128, and that is because we're giving the controller spare area. So as bad blocks are retired, we've got spares to work with. Now, if a drive does run out of spare blocks, it will go into a failure mode. Mm-hmm. But I mean, natively, you just get about 4% of the total flash area as spares, and then if you're giving the drive more over provisioning, you're making that drive more robust even further. So we're big on over provisioning at Kingston. We think that the benefits far outweigh the small loss in user capacity and longevity. But yeah, the controller technology's come a long way. We've got very good background garbage collection routines. We have trim in place. So the current crop of SSDs from reputable companies, which I always say, you know, you should expect steady state performance over the life of that drive.
Are there more spare blocks in enterprise level drives than there are in client, or it's pretty much the same across?
It's pretty much the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's safe to say that, in general, people are going to be changing out their systems before an SSD is going to go bad, if it goes bad. Like Cameron's saying, the current crop of SSDs out there, it's great. You don't have to worry about that.
We sell millions of SSDs, and I can tell you that one of the my group works closely with our RMA returns department, and we do not have an issue at all with drives coming back that are completely worn out. We see drives. We don't even see drives below 50% usage typically.
No, so normally RMA will be power surge blew out a controller.
They're going to alert us if we have a situation where we're getting a lot of drives back that are worn out. You know, we're going to know about it.
Right.
And it's with the number of drives we're shipping. We're supposed to ship 10 million drives this year. We are not seeing any problems whatsoever in terms of getting drives back that are worn out. So it's a good indication of
how good
SSD,
it is.
Yeah, how good it is, how good the technology really is. It's the truth.
Cameron, David, I want to thank you very much for being here, for being in studio. It's always fun when we can have guests in studio, especially since I've worked with you for a very long time, and I've seen how you've advanced the technology over the years, and I thank you for that. And I thank you for letting us play with your toys, because it also gives us a way to actually show people that the numbers are real world. Of course, this is the time when we say thank you to our audience, and we say thank you very much for listening to the best dang enterprise podcast in the world. That's according to 9 out of 10 SSDs. But if they wanted to find out more about Kingston, about your divisions, about what you do, where's the best way to get a hold of you? Let's start with you, David.
Pretty easy. Just go to kingston.com. Very simple. That's the best way to find information there. You know, we have data sheets on there. If you're worried about drive total bytes written, things like that, speeds, IOPS, it's all there for you.
Right. So you don't want to give like a phone number or Twitter address, maybe a home address? No.
Yeah, no, it's...
Cameron, Kingston.com as well?
Yeah. You can reach me directly through email at Cameron_Crandall@Kingston.com.
Everybody write him right now. Just say hello. Let's flood his email box.
And yeah, I will respond. like all of us, we're attached to email all day long. So yeah, I frequently respond directly to our customers and our own internal salespeople. So
it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. And of course, thanks to my co-hosts. I would not be able to do this show without them. Well, before we bring in both Lou and Curtis, we do have a special visitor who he heard about us talking about transatlantic, trans-Pacific fiber and also about SSDs, and he wanted to say hello. Do we have any video feed from this man? Oh, my goodness, it's Brian Chi. Cheebert, how are you even talking to us?
The magic of LTE hotspots, I'll tell you.
You're on a boat?
I am on the Volendam from Holland, America, and we have just pulled into the port of Juneau, Alaska.
That's why you've got bandwidth, because you're sitting in... I'm like, if you're in the middle of a glacier trip, how are you getting any connectivity?
No, actually, tomorrow we go into Skagway and then head up into Denali National Park via train.
Well, Cheebert, we're actually going to be together in just a few weeks. We're going to be at Black Hat and DEF CON, so you go off and you enjoy ice.
And more ice.
And more ice. And more ice. It was great to see you, Cheebert. Thank you for calling in. Our week would not be complete. And yes, we will save the fiber story for when you get back.
Right on. And that's Kathy photobombing.
What's a twite without a photobomb? Of course, the following two gentlemen don't ever need to photobomb. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, it is always fun to talk to you. You always bring such insight into the show. We're getting superimposed over each other right now. It's very strange. I'm not sure what's going on with the TriCaster, but could you please tell the folks what you'll be doing on Information Week Radio this week?
Well, we've got lots of entertaining things happening. One of the big things is not this coming week, but in 2 weeks, we have the return of Interop Radio. We've got a lot of good stuff that's going to be happening starting in 2 weeks going forward in print, as it were. I'm working on profiles of our Information Week Elite 100 solutions from around the industry that show off what people and companies are doing with technology. Would love to have people stop by and let us know what they think of those at informationweek.com.
Are you going to be at Black Hat at all broadcasting this year?
I am not. I get to stay home. I'm going to be handling some radio production duties for the Dark Reading crew while they're on site. So I get to participate, but sleep in my own bed, which isn't a bad thing.
No, not at all. We'll see you. We'll see you the next event we get out together. And of course, we want to thank my co-host for Coding 101, a frequent guest of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and of course, co-host this week, Mr. Lou Maresca. Lou, senior software developer over at Microsoft. Again, thank you very much for coming on, and thank you for trying to fill some big shoes with Cheebert being out.
Big shoes. Hopefully I did a good job.
Yeah, absolutely you did. You give us insight, and you also give us insider information, which is always nice. We just hope every time, as we do, that we didn't get you fired. Lou Maresca, could you please tell the folks where they can find you?
Absolutely. You can always find me on Twitter, LouMM. And, of course, all my work at Microsoft can be found at crm.dynamics.com.
All right. And, folks, don't forget that we've got a big crew here that makes this show possible, because we do it live, well, mostly every Friday at about 1 o'clock p.m. Pacific time. If you just go to live.twit.tv, you can see all of their work and what we do in the pre-show and the post-show and all the bloopers that happen in between that get cut out of the finished production. As long as you're watching their work live, go ahead and jump into our chat room at irc.twit.tv. If you can't watch us live, go to our show page here at twit.tv/Twiet. There you'll find our entire back catalog along with our show notes and a place where you can subscribe. This is the best way to watch Twiet. You drop the audio version, the video version, the high-definition video version into your device of choice, so you can watch us on your phone, your tablet, your PC, your desktop, laptop, the big TV at home. No matter what version you want, we're going to give it to you because we love you. We also want to thank those folks who have worked tirelessly to make the show happen. Of course, to Karsten, my super producer, and to Zach, my TD, who I almost dread to throw to. But Zach, what can people find you doing on the Twit TV network?
Oh, don't worry about it. Twitter, you can find me, Padre, you can find me on Twitter at Eskimo Zach. That's Zach spelled with an H. Nothing too clever planned today, so Don't worry.
Okay. All right. I always a little nervous. You can also find me on Twitter at twitter.com/PadreSJ. It's a great place to go if you want to find out what I'm doing in between shows or who's going to be on and what topics we're going to be covering on every episode of Twilight. It's also a really good place to suggest guests or topics that you want for future shows. Until next time, I'm Father Robert Balaser, and just remember, if you want to know what's going on in the Enterprise, just keep quiet.